My name is Olivia. I'm 32 now, but this story started 5 years ago when I was 27 and my own sister stole my husband, had a baby, and my parents helped her do it. Before I tell you how I cut them all off and built a life they can only dream of, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Okay, let's go back. Back to the beginning. Growing up in our quiet, middle-class Midwestern town, my family had 2 daughters. But from the outside, and even from the inside, it felt like they only had one. Her name was Rebecca. My older sister. She was the sun, a blazing star my parents orbited with devotion. I was the moon, expected to reflect her light and never, ever outshine her. Her life was a curated collection of achievements my parents proudly displayed. There were the expensive ballet lessons that filled our evenings with the sound of her practicing, the piano recitals where she'd wear velvet dresses, and the shiny red convertible that appeared on our driveway for her 16th birthday, a giant bow on the hood. My requests were simpler. More modest. When I asked for a set of professional oil paints for my own 16th birthday, I was met with a strained smile from my mother. "Oh, honey, that's a bit much, isn't it? Money is tight." Money was always tight when it came to me. It flowed like a river for Rebecca. The difference was never more stark than on our graduation days. Rebecca's high school graduation was a catered affair at a local banquet hall. My parents had invited what felt like the entire town. I remember the ice sculpture and the little cocktail napkins with her name embossed in gold. It was an event. My graduation, for years later, was a handful of neighbors in the backyard. My dad burned the hot dogs on the grill. The main topic of conversation wasn't my diploma or my future, it was a loud, proud retelling of Rebecca's recent promotion at the marketing firm where she worked after getting her MBA. I remember my aunt pinching my cheek and saying, a little too loudly, "So, Olivia, what are you going to do with a degree in fragrance chemistry? Make air fresheners?" My mother didn't defend me. She just laughed nervously and quickly changed the subject back to Rebecca. That was the pattern. When I got into my highly competitive, specialized program, the congratulations were muted. When I asked for help with tuition, my father sat me down. "Look, Liv," he said, sighing as if I'd asked for the world, "we'd love to help, but we just finished paying off the last of the student loans for Rebecca's master's degree. Her college fund was a huge investment. We just don't have it." So, I learned not to ask. I learned to rely on myself. I worked my way through school, taking double shifts at a diner and a weekend job at a small, independent perfume shop. That shop was my sanctuary. It was where I could be around the one thing that made my world make sense, the art of scent. It was there, during my final year of college, that I met Nathan. He wasn't like anyone I had ever known. He was a successful tech entrepreneur, but he didn't have the arrogance I expected. He was curious. He'd come into the shop, and instead of just asking for a popular brand, he'd ask me about the process. His eyes would light up when I'd explain the difference between a top note and a base note, or the way sandalwood could anchor a more volatile citrus scent. On our first real date, he took me to a botanical garden and spent 3 hours just listening to me talk about the smells of the flowers, the damp earth, the rain in the air. He made me feel seen. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't invisible. Our relationship was a whirlwind romance. He was my biggest cheerleader, encouraging me to create my own blends in my spare time. After a year of feeling truly cherished, he proposed on a trip to the coast, the ring hidden in a seashell. I remember calling my parents, my hand shaking with pure joy. The silence on the other end of the line was my first clue. My mother finally spoke, her voice flat. "Oh. Well, that's nice, dear." Her first question wasn't about my happiness. It was, "So, he's well off then? I know his family has money. Does he have any wealthy friends? Rebecca is single, you know, and she's been so focused on her career." It felt like a punch to the gut. Even in what should have been my moment, it was still all about Rebecca. The wedding planning was a slow-motion nightmare. It became my mother and Rebecca's project. They vetoed my choice of simple wildflowers for the bouquets. Not impressive enough for Nathan's family, Rebecca had sniffed. They insisted on a band I hated because it was more upscale. I felt like a guest at my own wedding. Then came the day itself. I should have known something was wrong when Rebecca showed up in a slinky, champagne-colored dress that was almost white. She looked stunning, and she knew it. Throughout the entire reception, she was a magnet, pulling all the attention. She attached herself to Nathan's side, networking shamelessly with his colleagues and investors. Her hand was always on his arm, his back. She'd throw her head back and laugh at his jokes, a throaty, intimate sound that made my stomach clench. Every so often she'd glide over to me, her eyes sparkling with something that looked like malice, and say, "You are just so lucky, Olivia. You really landed on your feet." It was a compliment shaped like a knife, and she twisted it every time. After the wedding, she became a fixture in our lives. She'd use her key to our house to show up unannounced, always perfectly dressed, always when Nathan was due home from work. I once came home to find them in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of expensive wine Nathan had been saving, laughing over some inside joke. They stopped when I walked in. I felt like I was the intruder. I tried to talk to Nathan about it. "It feels like she's always here," I said one night. "It makes me uncomfortable." He just sighed, a deep, annoyed sound. "Liv, she's your sister. She's family. Don't be so insecure. It's not a good look." So I tried to ignore it. I tried to believe I was being paranoid. Then Nathan started working late. Constantly. "Big project at work," he'd say, kissing me distractedly before heading back to his laptop. The distance between us grew into a chasm. One Tuesday night, he came home well after midnight. As he shrugged off his jacket, the smell hit me. It was a cloud of perfume. A strong, cloying, floral scent I knew all too well. It was Rebecca's signature fragrance, the one she wore like armor. My blood ran cold. The whole world seemed to slow down. I couldn't breathe. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My voice came out as a dead, flat whisper. "You were with her, weren't you?" He had the decency to look ashamed. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at a spot on our expensive hardwood floor and mumbled the words that detonated my life. "We didn't mean for it to happen. It's a real connection. We fell in love." My first instinct, my gut reaction, was to call my mom. I was hysterical, shattered, sobbing so hard I could barely form words. I gasped out the story, that Nathan was leaving me, that it was for Rebecca. I pleaded with her, my voice that of a broken child, "Mom, please, can I just come home for a few days? I have nowhere to go." There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. Then her voice, sharp and cold as a shard of glass, cut right through me. "Olivia, I think you need to take a good, long look at yourself and ask why this happened. Men need a woman who is exciting. A partner. Not a hobbyist. A hobbyist." That's what she called my passion. "Besides," she added, her voice dismissive, "we can't have you here right now. The house is under renovation." Under renovation. The lie was so blatant, so lazy, it was almost more insulting than the truth. And the truth slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. They knew. My mother, my father, they had known about the affair. And they had chosen her. They had chosen Rebecca. In their twisted view of the world, their golden child deserved the successful husband, and I was just an obstacle to her happiness. The divorce was a masterclass in cruelty. Nathan, the man who once promised to cherish me, hired a legal shark who tore me apart on the stand. My court-appointed attorney barely put up a fight. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed so trustingly was a trap, designed to protect his assets completely. I walked away with nothing. No house, no savings, not a single penny from our shared life. He even kept the car. But that wasn't enough for them. The final blow came a week later. I was called into the office of my boss at the perfume shop, a kind woman named Maria. She couldn't look me in the eye. On her desk was a thick, cream-colored envelope. A letter from Nathan's law firm. "Olivia, I am so sorry," she stammered, pushing the letter across the desk. It's a legal notice. It accuses you of having access to proprietary knowledge from your relationship with Nathan and suggests you could use it to compete. It's insane, I know, but we're a small business. We can't afford a legal fight with someone like him. I was fired. My one safe space, my sanctuary, had been poisoned. I stood on a street corner with one suitcase and a cardboard box of my belongings. 27 years old. Divorced, homeless, jobless, and utterly, completely abandoned by every person I was supposed to be able to count on. I found a dingy, one-room apartment in the worst part of town. For 2 days, I didn't move from the floor. I just sat there, in the silence, feeling the full weight of my despair. I had nothing left. I was nothing. On the third day, I finally opened the single cardboard box I'd brought with me. Inside, nestled among some old textbooks, was my perfume-making kit. My glass beakers, my droppers, my collection of essential oils. It was the only part of my old life that was still mine. I picked up a small bottle of Jasmine Absolute. I remembered my mother's voice in my head, dripping with disdain. A hobbyist. All day with that silly perfume stuff. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a gentle shift. It was a violent, seismic break. The grief and the pain curdled into a cold, hard diamond of rage. They thought they had buried me. They didn't realize they had planted a seed. The beginning was brutal. I turned my tiny, grim kitchen into a lab. The place constantly smelled of rubbing alcohol and 100 competing scents. My life became a monotonous cycle of sleepless nights spent experimenting and long days researching suppliers and learning about e-commerce. I lived on instant noodles and pure, unadulterated spite. My only human contact was with Chloe, my old friend from the perfume shop. She was horrified by what had happened. She'd show up at my door with groceries and sit with me for hours while I worked, helping me label tiny bottles and offering encouragement. She helped me design a simple website and was my very first online order. For months, my only sales floor was a rickety folding table at a local farmer's market. I learned to endure the humiliation of people walking past my table without a glance. I learned to celebrate the small victory of selling a single $10 bottle. I faced setbacks that almost broke me. One night, I mixed up 2 chemicals and ruined an entire batch of perfume base, a mistake that cost me $200 I didn't have. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried, surrounded by the smell of my failure. But the next morning, I got up and started again. Slowly, something began to happen. A customer would come back the next week, telling me how much they loved a scent. They'd bring a friend. A small, loyal community began to form online. People were drawn to the story of a handcrafted product made with passion. I packed every single order myself, writing a personal thank you note for each one. The real shift came from a single email. It was from a young woman who said her mother had bought a bottle of my perfume at the market and given it to her. The daughter's name was Jenna, and she was a beauty blogger with a modest but highly engaged following. She wrote, "I'm usually skeptical of these kinds of products, but your aura scent is honestly one of the most beautiful and complex things I have ever smelled. I'd love to feature it." I sent her a package with my entire tiny collection. A week later, her review went live. She didn't just review the perfume, she told the story of a small, independent artist. The effect was instantaneous. My phone started buzzing with sale notifications and didn't stop. The blog post was shared, then shared again. It was picked up by larger accounts. Suddenly, I wasn't getting 10 orders a week, I was getting 100 a day. It was exhilarating, but it was also a crisis. I ran out of bottles, labels, and my most crucial ingredients. For 2 weeks, I barely slept, scrambling to find suppliers, negotiating prices, learning about bulk shipping. It was a baptism by fire. I was being forced to transform from a hobbyist into a real business owner. And then, the email that would change everything arrived. The subject line was simple: Partnership Inquiry, Davenport Luxury Retail. My heart hammered against my ribs. Davenport's was the pinnacle of luxury and institution. I was sure it was a mistake. It wasn't. Ms. Davenport, the legendary CEO, had been given a bottle by a junior buyer who followed Jenna's blog. She was intrigued. She wanted a meeting. A week later, I was walking into the Davenport corporate headquarters in downtown Chicago. I was wearing my one and only blazer, which I'd had dry cleaned twice. The boardroom was an intimidating space of glass and chrome overlooking the city. Ms. Davenport was exactly as I'd imagined, elegant, poised, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. I had practiced my pitch for 3 days straight. My voice shook for the first minute, then I found my footing. I didn't talk about my personal life. I talked about my craft. I walked her and her team through the chemical composition of my scents, the sustainable sourcing of my ingredients, my vision for a brand built on authenticity. They grilled me for an hour. They asked about production capacity, marketing strategies, profit margins. It was a test, and I knew it. When it was over, a heavy silence filled the room. Ms. Davenport picked up a bottle of Aura, sprayed a little on her wrist, and inhaled deeply. She looked directly at me. "Your passion is evident, Ms. Evans," she said, her voice even. "And your product is exceptional. We want an exclusive line. And we will launch it with a party that will put your name on the map." The launch party took place exactly 2 years after my life had been systematically dismantled. It was a surreal experience. The rooftop terrace of the Davenport flagship store was glittering with Chicago's elite. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. The air was filled with music, excitement, and the delicate scent of Aura, my creation. I was on a small stage, giving a speech. To my left stood the formidable Ms. Davenport. To my right stood Ethan, the kind, steady architect I had been dating for 6 months. He held my hand, his warmth a comforting anchor in the dizzying scene. I had just finished thanking Chloe and Ms. Davenport when a commotion erupted near the entrance. A woman was screaming. She pushed through the well-dressed crowd, stumbling forward. Her hair was a tangled mess, her clothes were stained, and she was clutching a crying baby to her chest like a shield. It was Rebecca. Her eyes, wild and desperate, locked onto mine. "Olivia," she shrieked, her voice raw and cracking. "You have to help me." The music screeched to a halt. 100 conversations died. Every phone in the room seemed to turn in her direction. She staggered towards the stage, a chaotic whirlwind of desperation. "He left me, Olivia," she sobbed, mascara creating black rivers down her cheeks. "Nathan kicked me out. He took everything. My credit cards are cancelled. I have nothing. You have to help me, for the sake of family." I stood frozen, the microphone feeling like a block of ice in my hand. Ethan moved slightly in front of me, a protective gesture. Rebecca was now at the foot of the stage, a wreck of a human being. She held the crying baby up higher, a prop in her personal tragedy. "You have to help him. He's your nephew. You owe us." I remained silent, my face a blank mask. My silence seemed to unnerve her more than any angry retort could have. It was her last, desperate gamble, and it was failing. She played her final, horrifying card. She screamed, the sound echoing across the stunned, silent rooftop, a confession born of pure panic. Nathan left me when he found out the baby wasn't even his. You owe me this, Olivia. You owe me. A collective, audible gasp went through the crowd. The air crackled with the raw, ugly truth of her final deception. So, there it was. The lie she had built her entire stolen life upon, now laid bare for the world to see. In that moment, looking down at the woman who had tried to utterly destroy me, I felt nothing I expected. Not hatred. Not a satisfying surge of victory. Just a profound, chilling pity. I lifted the microphone to my lips. My voice, when it came out, didn't shake. It was calm, clear, and amplified for everyone to hear. Rebecca, I said, my voice cutting through the silence with surgical precision. Your choices 2 years ago sealed your fate. I paused, letting the words land, letting everyone absorb the history in that single sentence. This, I said, gesturing with my free hand to the beautiful party, to the successful people, to the life I had meticulously built from the ashes of the one she had gleefully torched, is the result of my choices. Good luck with yours. I gave a single, sharp nod to the head of security. As they moved in, Rebecca finally crumpled, collapsing into a heap of hysterical sobs. As they gently but firmly escorted her away, a stunned silence held the rooftop captive. Then, one person started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, the entire terrace erupted in applause. It was a wave of validation that washed over me, cleansing the last remnants of my past. Ms. Davenport simply gave me a crisp, approving nod. It was over. A few days later, Nathan materialized outside my studio. He looked awful, thinner, older, with deep circles under his eyes. His startup had imploded after Rebecca's betrayal became public, coupled with her own venomous social media posts about his business practices. Liv, he stammered, his voice weak. I was a fool. A complete idiot. She played me. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Please, can we just talk? I looked at this man, this ghost from another life. The man I had once loved with all my heart. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no nostalgia. Just a vast, quiet emptiness where that love used to be. There's nothing left to talk about, Nathan, I said, my voice gentle but firm. I wish you the best. And I turned, walked into my building, and didn't look back. The final loose end arrived in the mail a week after that. A long, handwritten letter from my father. It was a rambling, self-pitying mess of excuses, detailing how they'd had to sell their home of 30 years to cover Rebecca's staggering debts from her life of lies. It ended, as I knew it would, with a timid, guilt-tripping request for money. I didn't write back. I didn't call. Instead, I got in my car and drove the 2 hours back to my old hometown. I parked down the street from the small, run-down house they were now renting. And I watched. I saw my father, his back now permanently stooped, struggling to push a lawnmower across their patchy, weed-filled lawn. I saw my mother on the porch, a pile of sewing alterations in her lap, her face etched with a permanent frown. They looked small and gray, and defeated by the consequences of their own cruelty. I watched them for a long time, not with hatred, but with a quiet, final sadness for what we could have been. Then I put the car in drive and drove away, and I have never been back. That was 2 years ago. Today, my company has 2 flagship stores and a thriving online business. My life is full. It's full of hard work, yes, but it's also full of a deep, quiet joy. It's full of a family I chose, Chloe, my brilliant CO, and Ethan, my rock, my partner, my best friend. We're getting married next month. A tiny ceremony on a beach, with just the handful of people who genuinely love us. Last week, he showed me the final blueprints for the house we're building. And this, he said, pointing to a large, sun-filled room, is your lab. I made sure to have it soundproofed, for when inspiration strikes at 3 a.m. The fact that he knew that he cherished that part of me, was everything. I also started a small foundation, the Aura Grant, that gives scholarships to young women in the sciences who don't have a family to support their dreams. In a way, I'm trying to be for them what I never had myself. Sometimes, I'll be in my new lab, sketching out formulas for the next fragrance. I'm working on one now. It's a complex scent. It starts with a sharp, almost bitter note, but it mellows into a warm, resilient, woody base that lingers beautifully. I'm calling it Sovereign. Because in the end, my family, my ex-husband, they thought they were burying me. They didn't understand they were just planting a seed. They taught me that the most important thing you can ever build isn't a business or a brand, but a life that is truly, unapologetically, and sovereignly your own. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it finds who it needs to. My question for you is, have you ever had to make a hard choice to cut someone out of your life to save yourself? Let me know in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing for more. It really does help. Thank you.